Moment.
Okay, here we are and ready to go. Hey. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our next episode of Good Deeds Day Facebook Live mini-series. In this series, we're having conversations with our partners all over the world, talking to them about the projects and things that they're engaged in today during these difficult times. Trying to give you top tips wherever you are around the world, just to make these times a little bit easier for all of us. My name is Tova Gar, and I oversee global partnerships and sponsorships here at Good Deeds Day. So today, I'd like to introduce our partner who we are speaking with, which is James Lim, who is in Singapore. James is the lead Thrive and Synergist and founder of Emmaus Strategies, a social worker by profession. And having personally overcome burnout at least 5 times, I know many of the people listening today can identify with that. Growing from each experience, he's now on a social mission to develop people, organizations, and communities to thrive for good. Emmaus Strategies is an award-winning social enterprise based in Singapore. They believe that every individual, family, organization, and community can thrive as they're meant to and be a force for greater good, something that we connect to very deeply here at Good Deeds Day. Their mission is fueling good by building thriving individuals, families, organizations, and communities. Welcome, James. We're so happy to have you with us here today.
Thanks for having me with you all, and really glad to meet everyone here. Yeah.
So speaking of being so glad to meet everyone, we want to remind you that if you are joining with us here live, or honestly, if you listen later too, we're always happy to hear. Feel free to write in the comments who you are, where are you listening in from, share a little bit about yourself. And of course, at any point during this interview, if you have any questions for James, feel free to write them in the chat and we will do our best to answer them. So today, I'm very excited because the topic that we're going to be talking about, I think, is relevant to everybody around the world, no matter where you are, no matter what your situation is. We are all dealing with this pandemic globally, and it has had a tremendous effect on our everyday life, and especially on our mental health and our mental status. And so the topic that we gave to today's conversation, or James gave, is how to win the psychological war against COVID-19, right? We've been very focused, and I think that we talk about this as well, and have talked about this on our Facebook interviews, is our practical tips, right? How do organizations come together? What do we do? How do we help our community? How do we people, help the people that we're working with? But I think that one of the big questions is, how do we take care of our own mental health and help the people who are around us? So I'm excited to be talking with you today. And I want us to just to get us started, why don't you share with us a little bit about the situation in Singapore right now?
Yeah, thanks, Tova. Well, with in Singapore, we are actually on a kind of a situation of what we call a circuit breaker, where we are basically trying to stop community transmission by having people work from home and having businesses, not operate during this point in time, with only the essential services. So that will definitely include your healthcare services, your those providing food and delivery services and telecommunication services. So during this point in time, really majority of us are actually working from home. We're trying to avoid going out to buy. Unless it's really necessary, we are actually allowed out to go out, but we have to wear a mask and we have to practice what they call safe distancing. So even at food places and all these, we actually have there are like 1 meter marks where we actually have to queue. So when I go and buy my favorite food, it always seems like, oh, why is there like a long queue? But then I realized, oh, it's because of safe distancing. But generally everybody is cooperative here, we managed to actually bring down community transmission to its minimal. Of course now I think there are efforts in various other areas as well, including actually taking care of our migrant workers as well, who are actually because there are like transmission clusters there as well. So the government is actually looking into that and also helping. I mean, as in one good thing I think that I'm quite glad to hear is how the government is also beginning to put the spotlight on mental health. And they started things like even a international care hotline where people can actually call in if they need help and if they need to talk to someone. So yeah, that's pretty much where we are at. But it has been an interesting time. I think an interesting time of learning for everyone.
Mhm.
Just like for example, I think I'm not sure whether how many of you will be familiar with like bubble tea. It's actually kind of like a tea with pearl. So typically, um, uh, a lot of people actually queue outside the shop to wait for their bubble tea to be prepared. So that's actually one of the businesses that's affected that has been closed, and even hairdressers as well. Hairdressers were just allowed to reopen just a few days ago. But we are kind of reaching the end of our supposed circuit breaker. It will
Mhm.
end on the 1st of June if all goes well. But yeah, I think a lot of us are just can't wait to really get back. For the circuit breaker to
Yeah.
end, and to get back to doing, life going back to almost like normal. Yeah.
Right.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, I love that you're talking about it as safe distancing as opposed to
Mhm.
social distancing. I know in a lot of places in the world, it's been called social distancing, which I
Hmm.
find is really problematic, right? Because it's not about not being social or connecting. It's connecting in a different way. It's just about
Hmm.
being distant physically because we need to be physically distant to be safe. But it's not about socially distancing, right? It's still,
Yeah.
in fact, I hope we talked about this today, right? It's about maintaining community as opposed to separating community. So thank you for first of all, the phrase, which I hope that we can all adapt, is safe distancing instead of social distancing.
Hmm.
So I know that you deal a lot with stress and mental health, and one of the things that you guys created, which was the COVID-19 stress quiz. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what the results of the quiz were?
Well, the COVID-19 stress quiz actually began as a kind of a very simple project because I know I think from talking to people, we do know people are stressed with COVID-19, and we've always wanted, as mental health practitioners, right? We always want people to just not just focus on the physical health side. I mean, it is a battle that is fought on the physical front, the physical health side, but equally on the mental health side as well. So it was just like a simple project that I started to want to help people to kind of gain awareness about what is stressing them out, and what is the current state of what's the stress level of our community. Because all of us can say we are stressed. We might be triggered, especially during this time where many will be working from home. Children will be at home. So in Singapore, we have this thing called home-based learning, where kids are actually learning from home, where the schools are giving them schoolwork, so they can learn from home. So I know it's a very trying time for a lot of people, but and people could get triggered and angry and all that. But do people to really know what is really stressing them? Because unless you know what's stressing you out, you can't really do something about it. So that's kind of like the one of the main reason why we started the stress quiz. It's really like a self-assessment tool for you to go through, and kind of then have a better insight into what is really stressing you out. And based on the score that you get, we will then actually give a certain, some handles for you to actually deal with the stress in those areas. And
Mhm.
interestingly, you are also able to see the real time community stress level. Because we kind of collate the responses for everyone and kind of show it in a chart. So you will kind of have a good insight into not just how you're feeling, but how is the community faring in terms of the stress. We basically some interesting findings. I mean, I don't think it's really shocking, but we did find 100% of people being stressed by COVID-19.
Yeah.
But majority, 4 in 10 people in Singapore are actually experiencing an escalated level of stress. And
Mhm.
these are we've realized that the areas of stress are in the areas of relational stress as well as physiological stress. So relational stress will be things like conflicts, having to deal with family, conflicts in family, conflicts with co-workers, uh, and in physiological will be things like, for example, the experience of going out to get your essentials, being unable to access your favorite gym or the cinema or your
Mhm.
recreational facilities. So we've these are some of the things that we have actually found. Yeah. Mm.
Mhm. I love, two things that you've mentioned. First of all, the awareness, right? A lot of
Mm.
times when we're stressed, we know that we're stressed, we know that something's going on, but we don't necessarily know what it is in the situation that's causing our level of stress. And even just the awareness that, X, Y, or Z, or that, what's going on in my family is really what's causing the stress. Or maybe actually it's not what's going on in my family, but it's something external that's that's causing pressure that then is causing me to behave in a certain way towards my family. Just the awareness of that, I think, can make a huge difference. And I love the fact that you're allowing people to see the community, because I think one of the things that I think it's a challenge of modern times is that often we live in a bubble, in the sense that we think that the way we're feeling is different than everybody else, right? That we're having a struggle right now, but everybody else is completely fine, right? I say it's always the challenge of Facebook, in the world of Facebook, where we're looking, or Instagram, where we're looking at people's best face put forward and not at the struggles that are behind them, is that we think we're struggling, but I'm sure everybody else is doing okay with this, right? But by seeing everybody else, you realize that you're not alone in this, and that, and I think in itself, can be of great comfort to people.
Yeah.
So I think that's great.
Yeah.
If people, by the way, are interested in seeing the stress test, you can go to your website, right, and see it there and see what that looks like, the stress quiz.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure I think someone will actually provide the link to the stress quiz. And yeah, thanks, Tova. I mean, I do agree that, having that insight is powerful. Because I think by just knowing that not just you are stressed, and that you're not the weird one, that a lot of people are stressed as well. But I think importantly as well, knowing that other people are stressed also help you to be kind of empathetic to them, knowing that your friends are also not going through an easy time. Personally, in the last few weeks, I have been blessed by friends, who actually have reached out, and sometimes it could even be just blessing me with and it's just very nice, they just bless me with a simple meal. They just have some food delivered to my home, and I think that's really nice, that people are actually looking out for one another as well.
Yeah, I agree. So let's get practical and talk about, how do you deal with some of the stressors that you mentioned before?
Okay, so
what
let's
can
say, for
people
example,
do?
yes. So let's say, for example, in the area of when we're talking about one of the top areas of where escalated stress has been registered is relational. So in relational, things could happen, and you could get very triggered and angry. And so one of the practical things that we always tell people to do is, this is actually an opportune time for a lot of us to actually bond with our families, right? I mean, I always remember in the past we always say, oh, if only I had more time, I could spend more time with my families. But it is, and I think most people want to do that, but just that, it's hard. So what we do is that we try to actually give people certain ideas about, for example, one of the things that we actually tell people is that try to engage in or what I call analog activities, that means non-digital activities, right? So play some board games, play a jigsaw puzzle. I had good fun playing with my kid. I have 2 young kids, so we actually did a jigsaw puzzle together. Stay communicated with, stay in communication, keep communication channel open with other extended families, because especially during this time, you're not able to travel, as you're not able to meet your extended family members. Sending what I call like very little video and audio bites of your life to one another actually would be very nice, right? And even being affirming, like being with kids, even with adults as well, affirming them and amplifying the positives. So these are like some of the things that we actually tell people, what they can do, and it shouldn't just stop in the families. We could actually do something in the community as well. It's like thanking the frontliners, the people who are working. And when talking of frontliners, it's not just your healthcare professionals, but even people who make your life possible, amidst this working from home, like people in telecommunications, the cleaners, the people who are in transport, transport workers. And so we do give some of these advice to people, for example, for actually dealing with the relational stresses. For physiological stresses, what we do is we actually tell people, like, for example, some of the things we tell them to do is that, yes, you may not be able to access your favorite gym, right? Or your recreational facilities. So you may want to actually turn to things that you could do in your house itself. Things like, reading a book, or even just engaging in online workout, with friends. Or and even if you need to go out to buy your essentials, we do know that it can be very stressful, especially, when you want to buy something and you've always been using this particular brand of the thing that you buy, right? Could be a shampoo or something, and you go there and then there's this long queue and you don't find it's out of stock. So we typically tell people, who says that, plan your grocery shopping trips, take stock of what you need to buy, and think beforehand what happens if it doesn't have the particular brand, what alternatives do you actually want to look into. So things like that, we kind of put together some of these things. And when people fill up the stress quiz, what we do is that we actually give them some of these handles at the end of the stress quiz for them to know how to deal with the stresses. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I want to focus on the two different ones, because I think they're different, and I think they're important. When you were talking about the mental one, so on the one hand, like I see things like in my own personal family, where now we have regular Zoom meetings for the extended family, right? Which on the one hand is very nice, right? When would we ever have time to meet on a daily basis, with my siblings and my nieces and nephews and my parents, everybody together, right? Sharing things, which has also brought on a tremendous amount of creativity, because there's cooking classes that we do for each other. Now we're big into Kahoots. As every one of my nephews is putting together a Kahoot. My parents put together a Kahoot on for the grandchildren, on how they met and their history. So, so there's ways to connect differently. And at the same time, what that brings up for me is the challenge of the people who maybe don't have a strong network, right? Or don't have a strong family, and how can we support them and help them during those times? You know what? I'll ask that, and then I'll ask my other question, because I think that in itself is let you answer that one first. So how can we support people who don't necessarily have a network?
Definitely. I think it's definitely a very important issue to look into, especially there's this conversation that's going on in here in Singapore as well, because there are some, like, for example, seniors who are staying alone, and people who are maybe like singles, who may not have a very big social network. So how do we actually take care of them? I think one of the things is that, if you are a friend of someone who belongs to potentially belongs to a vulnerable group like this, for example, lonely seniors or isolated seniors, or people who feel that, or even like introverts. I am an introvert, even though a lot of people can't tell that I'm an introvert. Look out for them. If you're a friend, you just check in with them. We've started a very simple campaign just last week called I Care One. Actually, it's a very colloquial way, a very local way of saying, I really care, so they like to put I Care One behind. But actually what I Care One actually does is that we actually encourage people to just each day check in with one person, of your choice. You can set a time, let's say 9 a.m., and then just drop a note, drop a call, to someone, say, how are you doing? How can I help you? And I think that little gesture would really be great, in helping people know that they're not alone, that there are people looking out for you. That's one way. Another way, I think what we could do is to volunteer, and there are actually a lot of ground up movements. I believe not just in Singapore. I believe around the world, of people looking out for one another. And so there are social service agencies that are looking to actually reach out to some of these, and they may know some of these people who could be in the vulnerable group, and they could be looking into that. But I think at this point in time, where everybody is actually kind of like staying away, and social service agencies might find it difficult to reach out to some of these people, it would be a good time to also offer your service, to see whether how can you flow along with what the social services are doing, in reaching some of these people. Yeah. So in Singapore, I'm not sure wherever you are, but you might be able to tap into networks, to see whether how you can help. So like in Singapore, we have this network, this portal called giving.sg, and we have many ground up initiatives that have been set up. So tap into some of these networks that you know are around, and begin to see whether what you can do. I think sometimes just lending a listening ear could be actually a very good way. Yeah.
And I want to remind everybody, which I think is one of the things I'm taking from what you're saying, is that vulnerable groups, right now, are not necessarily who we would typically describe as a vulnerable group on a regular basis. So
Hi, Tova.
Some of them, when we're, we need to stay together, then that can really be a challenge. So I have a question for us, which I will hold off my own question before. We have a question here from Togo, from Sam from Togo, who's asking, can you give an example of actions that we can take for the homeless people in times of COVID-19? It's a good question, Sam. So what do we do with the homeless people? How can we support them?
Well, I mean, I'm sure in different parts of the world, we would have different variations of lockdowns or social distancing or safe distancing that are being implemented, right? So I'm sure it will be different in every country, but where in in places where you may not, there isn't a lockdown, and all that, maybe one of these things you could do, like what I mentioned, I think there's power in going in a very organized manner, because I think sometimes there's chaos also if everybody starts going into their own ground up initiative, which are good, but just that sometimes I think we should actually move very strategically. And one of the ways is really to work with the local charities and nonprofits that are really looking into this, because they are the ones who know where they are. They are the ones who know what these people need, right? So in Singapore, we don't really have a situation with, we don't have a major situation with homeless. So, I can't really profess to be an expert in this area, but one of the ways that I think you could really do is just, give a call, do a Google search for organizations that are looking into helping the homeless during this time in your locality. Get in touch with them, and really start dialoguing with them to see what is it that could be done. I mean, sometimes they may, again, like I mentioned, with different variations of the lockdown, right? I mean, in some places you could even help by even giving essentials, by delivering essentials to some of these homeless people, whereas in certain places you can't do that. So you might, for example, help in more of a back end or indirect manner in helping with the operations to make sure that the homeless people get the help that they need. Yeah. So I think a more strategic way will be to work with the various charities that are already looking into it. And if there isn't, and if you're really passionate about it, then I really recommend you to actually start a ground up initiative to look into that. Gather a few like-minded people together, brainstorm ways that you can do it in a safe manner, and really reach out, to these people. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Yeah, and I'll contribute something as well. I know that in the neighborhood that I live in, even though there are
Okay, I think yes, Tova is back.
sure to help transfer who are willing to. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I get lost?
Yeah, I think you got frozen a while. Yeah.
I got frozen. Okay, so I'll repeat that again. Is that in where I live, one of the initiatives that I saw some people taking was that they connected with bakeries that are still working and with some restaurants who were doing takeaway. And so making sure that they maintain safety, they collect the food from them that they have left over at the end of the day, and they go out and they give them out. It's at least where I live, you can see at least some of the homeless, they stay in some pretty regular places, and they simply go out and give them food because it's an issue that they know that they have, and so they make sure to take care of them. But I think one of the things that is accurate is really making sure that you have to look at what's going on in your own country, maintain the safety and the restrictions that you have, and work with what you have. Which brings me, by the way, to what I was gonna, was actually a great link to what I was gonna say next, which is something that you mentioned right around volunteering and thanking people, right? One of the things that we know in general in life makes us feel better and does great things for our own mental health is doing good for others. And so being aware, being thankful for the people around us who still have to go to work. And while I know we give tremendous appreciation for our medical workers, and they deserve it, they're the everyday workers who are sacrificing a tremendous amount. Like you said, the people who are taking care of transportation, the people working in the store for us, so we can buy food and buy our essentials, and making sure to thank them in various ways, which I think is really important. I appreciate you you bringing that up. And then leads me to my next thing, which was, you were talking about the physical issue, right? Of going out and the stress that brings when you have to go shopping or anything that actually requires you to go out of the house. Can you expand on that a little bit, on how, especially for those of us in various countries like where I am right now, where we're starting to ease up the restrictions and go back into world, what can we do to make this a little bit less stressful for us?
So we're talking about the physiological stress, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of it actually, one of it is also what I would go back to actually. It's really understanding the need for safe distancing or social distancing. And I think a lot of us could, in the early stages when it happens, right, when it's being implemented, we could actually get very upset about it because one of the top reasons when we ask people the question, why are you facing escalated stress level in physiological stress? And one of the top answers is because that they actually says that there is a perceived loss of autonomy. There is a perceived loss of freedom, right? So it's kind of like my freedom has been curtailed. And I think the first thing that we can do is really to understand the rationale behind some of the safe distancing measures that are put in place. I mean, it's really not meant to really curtail your autonomy and your freedom. And I think sometimes, when we deal with that expectation, it helps us to better appreciate why some of these things need to be put in place. They're not easy measures to be put in place, okay? Because I think when measures like this are being put in place, a lot of people will get very, very upset about it. So I think the first thing first is really to come to terms with why these measures are being put in place, and it's really to protect, right? It's really to bring down, and it's not meant, at least I don't believe it's meant to be a long-term thing, but at least at this present moment to trying to bring down community transmission to its minimal. So the first thing I think it's really that it's really to understand, and then other things that we can do, like for example, like I mentioned, the experience in purchasing essentials, is just to really go in a very strategic manner of just planning your trips, and then and I think that's really it, it's really to deal with the expectations that, why am I not able to do this now, and what can I do about it amidst all these restrictions. I think we can still find ways of coping with it, even with all these restrictions. Like I mentioned, if I'm not able to really go to for me, I love to go to the movie theaters for, to just watch a movie to de-stress, and that has been kind of like my go-to, for when I want to actually care for myself. And of course, with current situation, I'm not able to do that now. Of course, then you have to be creative about it. Do you actually then catch, for example, movies online? I think over the last few weeks, we've seen, musicals being available to actually watch online, right?
Right.
You can watch movies and all that. Or, better still, rather than doing that, why don't you just like bond with your family, rather than, catching a movie. You can now take that and change to something else. Be involved in a home improvement project with your family, right? Do something. Grow a plant. I as part of my child's project, home-based learning project, he has to grow bean sprouts, and so that's kind of like my first experience of doing something with him, and guiding him. And he's young, he's 5 years old, but I think it's good also for me to actually take this opportunity to bond with him and to teach him responsibility, right? That you have to water your plant once every few days. You have to take good care of the plant. So I think it's, although at the very beginning we might feel we might feel very negative about it, that we are no longer able to do the things that we used to be able to do because of all these safe distancing measures. But if we kind of looked at it the other way, then what is it that we can make the best out of it? Where we are. Yeah. So, like doing foods and cooking. Um, most of us maybe after that will be very good cooks, having been doing our own cooking and experimenting with different recipes and all that. Yeah, and I've started doing workout at home as well. And it took me a while because I realized that after a few weeks of not going to the gym, I realized that I was getting a little bit on the plus side, bigger, and I wasn't really doing much exercise at home. And so I said I need to do something, and why not do it with my kids, and so I make it into a routine now that I will work out with my kids, and yeah, it helps with my physical health, it helps with my bonding with my kids. Yeah, so I hope that helps. Just yes.
I think it helps a lot, and I think it reminds, those there are two key things I think that help us, right, with our mental health is, first of all, moving our body, which I think is very helpful in terms of our mental health, and the second of all is gratitude. Right, being able to be grateful for what we have and seeing the positive in what we have always does good things for our mental health. So I want to switch us over to something that I know will be relevant to a lot of people, which is how do you work from home effectively, right, and still stay sane? Not a simple thing these days.
Yes, definitely.
What are your tips for us?
Well, one of the major things that I've always talked about first is, and I think it may not be very new to some of us, is the importance of having routine, because this is a period, frankly speaking, if I were to actually say how we can actually characterize this period for most of us will be associated with things like uncertainty, anxiety, fear, frustration, anger, stress, and negative thoughts and all that, right? And because we are kind of like in a situation where we are grieving the loss of our old routine, the ways that we get things done. I mean, I don't know. Maybe for some of us, it's a routine that whenever we go to work, we will drop by our favorite coffee place, we grab our coffee or tea, and then now you're no longer able to do that, right? You have to be your own coffee place. You have to prepare your own coffee, right? Yeah, I mean, some of you may even become very good baristas after this. So, that's really one of the things that what we can do to start to actually work effectively from home. And that's really to have a routine first, because routine creates some kinds of consistency amidst all this situation of all these uncertainties. And it actually helps us to settle in. And so you kind of you work out your routine. And I always tell people you need to have a routine for at least three main areas. I think one is work, one is self-care, and another was for family. For connecting with either your immediate family members or with your extended family members or even with friends. So these three are actually very important, and you need to know what happens and what time. So for those of us who are struggling to work from home, it's important that you kind of worked out the time that is best for you to do your work. And then what's the time that you need to actually spend with your kids? Because especially if you do have young children and you have to deal with their home-based learning, you've got to guide them in their home-based learning. You're no longer just playing the role of an employee. You're now playing the role of a parent, right? A parent who needs to lead the child in his or her learning. And so you need to actually establish routine for that. One of the things that we can do is when we work with routines is to kind of have cues as well for our brains to actually tell us to say that we are transiting into different parts of our routine. So for example, meal times could be a very good way of, you could actually establish your routines around meal time. So let's say, for example, for the first half of the day, I work. So for example, for me, first half of the day, I work. And then lunchtime is kind of a cue for me. It says, okay, maybe it's a time for me to actually take a break now, have my meal, my proper meal, and then rest, and maybe spend time with my kids. So I would say the first thing is routine. Another personal favorite that I like, have you heard of this thing called MIT? Tova, have you heard of MIT? Most important.
I mean, I've heard of MIT. Most important.
Most important task. Yes. So yeah, I think Tova will come back again. So So the thing about it is that we also have to come
What?
into, sorry? Hi, Tova. Yeah, sorry, I
No,
missed.
go ahead. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
stuck for a moment. Go ahead.
So a lot of us would actually, in our day-to-day, in pre-COVID-19 days, we may be very accustomed to, having like 10 things on a to-do list and, checking them off, right? And finishing that and
Mm-hmm.
checking it off. Now we have to come to terms that times are different. We are in very different times now. We can't expect to do that same amount of work that we did before COVID-19. So for me, to be very frank, running a social enterprise, it's no easy feat. And for me, my wife is actually in essential services. She's in healthcare. So I'm actually at home with my kids alone. So I have to handle my social enterprise plus handle my kids, although I have help of my in-laws. But I realized that I cannot do as much as I did before COVID-19. I usually will be able to do like about 10 or 12 different things a day. But I just have to be realistic with myself, and now what I do is I try to actually pick top 3 MITs, the top 3, the top 3 most important tasks that I'll achieve for that day. And once I finish that, then I tell myself, okay, that's it. I'm done with it. I've looked online, I've did a bit of research. I've also realized that what some people did was that they also changed daily goals to become weekly goals. That instead of working on this and finishing, like X number of goals per day, now let me just stretch it out to the week. That I will attempt to finish this over this week. And so I would say that is also another one way that we can work effectively from home and keep our sanity. I would say the third way, and maybe this is just another tip, is really delegation. Because if we are really into micromanaging and looking at the details of things, it really would stress us out. Because remember, we have to deal with a lot of things that's happening, including what's at home and all that. We don't have the bandwidth to be able to really micromanage. And if you think about it, micromanaging would stress out other people in the team as well, right? Because you're not giving them autonomy to do things that they're tasked to do. So we could actually start to look into ways that we and manage our own expectations about what we can do, what we cannot do, communicate some of our expectations to our reports, and have and really trusting them to do what they need to do well. So I hope these 3 tips will be able to help you, in really establishing and being able to work effectively from home. There are other tips, and feel free to actually visit my website, because we do have a few mental well-being tips as well. And there's one post where we actually share 6 tips about how to actually work effectively from home. Yeah.
Great.
Silva?
Yeah, and we'll make sure that we have that link in the chat of this interview, so people can take a look and really connect. And I love what you're saying about being, first of all, our mental well-being being one of the things that we need to care for, right? It's not just work, it's not just family, it's also giving ourselves time for ourselves and taking care, self-care, which I think is really important. And one of the things that I'm hearing you say is really the not being so hard on ourselves. Right, which I think for many of us is hard, right? We're used to having high expectations from ourselves. We're used to achieving a lot. We're used to our bosses, if we have them, or if we run our own enterprise, having high expectations and functioning in a different kind of way, which just isn't possible right now, right? No matter what your situation is, we're all in an unusual situation. And so being kind to ourselves, first and foremost, I think is probably one of the most important and most difficult things that we have to face right now.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's interesting to note, one of the things that I do, or rather the main thing I do in my social enterprise, is really about helping people prevent burnout. Because, as Tova, you mentioned, I've been burnout for at least 5 times now, for various reasons, of course, and learning from these different episodes. And interestingly, Harvard Business Review, in one of their books about performance management, actually says people who are top performers are actually the ones that are most prone to burnout. And because they care so much about the work that they do, right? And passionate people, people in social services, in the charity work, they're most prone to burnout. And so, it's important sometimes that, if we find ourselves to be, we like to feel that we are top performers, right? And passionate about our work. And if you're especially in these areas, then it's very important for you to actually be, check about, what expectations do you have of yourself, and really deal with some of these things. One of the things that I like to deal with a lot of the people that I work with is also the area of self-talk. Psychologists, social workers, and counselors actually also say that we talk to ourselves, right? We don't talk to ourselves audibly. Well, I know some of us do. Yeah, but we talk to ourselves. We have this inner dialogue that's going on, and some of these expectations of ourselves, we end up beating ourselves up internally. When we kind of have a very negative and very destructive self-talk. That we expect ourselves to produce X amount of work every day, and if we don't, we feel that we are a failure, right? We are not compassionate about ourselves, not kind to ourselves, and so as you mentioned, it's important now that we know that, and we be cognizant that this is very different times. It's very stressful times, and we're just not able to achieve the same amount of work or even more than what we did before COVID-19. And it's not anything about us. It's not that we are less productive, or or we're not productive, we're not effective at all. It's none of that. I think it's just that we have to deal with many things on different fronts, and really to be more compassionate and kind to ourselves. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
I hope everybody's listening, because I know that the people listening to us today are all people who are passionate, deeply passionate about the work that they do, and I have no doubt are working very hard right now. So thank you for sharing that. I want us to touch one more thing before we end, which is, I know that you have some great tips for building mental resilience. So if you could explain a little bit about first what mental resilience is for anybody who may not know, and then really how do we strengthen that?
Sure. I love to talk about that because Tova, actually before this interview today, right? There was a very interesting episode that happened. So I mentioned that even though Singapore is on same, we are on this circuit breaker thing, where we have to stay home. We are not stopped from going out to buy essentials and food, for example. And so this morning I was out, getting food for my family, and as I was making on my way home, my footwear broke. I was coming down a flight of steps, and my footwear broke. And I found myself having to really, and I wrote an article just today about this, with a picture of my feet. I actually started the article by saying that this must be the most personal post I've ever written, because I'm showing my feet, yeah, and with the broken footwear. And why I actually bring this up is because really mental resilience that episode reminds me of mental resilience, because just as I was going through that, right, I was going through feelings of being angry, why must this happen? I'm carrying the food. I know it's a small thing, but really during times of very, what they call VUCA, very volatile, uncertain, and very complex and ambiguous time as this, right? Little things can really trigger us. And, I find myself in a situation where I was angry, I was worried, do I go back to get a new pair of shoes from the shops, but then the shops are not open, can I make it home? Will I tumble down the stairs? There was so many thoughts, that ran through my mind. But then again, I found myself having to then hold myself back and then ask myself, but then let's look at the positives, right? I am not ignoring the negatives. The negatives are there. It happened. My footwear broke. But it's also about the positives. Like, for example, one of the things that I'm really thankful for, just like I mentioned, gratitude, right? I'm really thankful for is my footwear broke just as I'm making my way home, because I had to drag my feet home. So you can imagine if it started at the very beginning of the journey, I have to drag my feet throughout the whole journey, which is about 45 minutes away from home. And that would have been a disaster. I'm thankful that I'm able to, I have footwear. I'm thankful I'm able to move around, And so, I realized that was a situation where I find myself being, needing to really walk the talk, pun intended, as well as really practice what I preach. And, and when I talk about mental resilience, one of the main thing I think I want to highlight from this as well is mental resilience is not talking about the absence of problems. It's talking about how you respond. How do you actually react, or rather how you respond. I won't want to use the word react because some of us could actually react very negatively. How do you actually respond, when things, seemingly bad things happen to us, what are the things that you're saying to yourself? What are the things that you're doing? We're not asking you to totally ignore the fact that the bad things have happened. We can't ignore that COVID-19 happened. But what is the thing that you can do to actually bounce back, to get back on track and not be, to be unfazed by what happened. And that, I think, is really what mental resilience is. It's not about being resilient so bad things won't happen, but it's being resilient so that you know what to do and get back on track. So for those of us who are passionate about, the different things that we're doing, whether it's do-gooders and, of volunteers, social workers, or social entrepreneurs, this is a very essential skill to have because, you will face trials, as you do the good, and especially during this COVID-19 situation, but it shouldn't stop you from doing what you have been called to do, right? And the good that you are doing. I always see people who do good as like superheroes, and this is the time that we really need to rescue all our superheroes, right? Because if we don't, then your community will have one less social worker, one less volunteer, one less passionate individual, who keeps our community alive. Yeah. So so that's kind of my take, about mental resilience. A little revelation I had today with my broken footwear.
Yeah, and I think that's a great message for everybody listening to us, whether live now or later. I think that was just wonderful. So given I'm looking at our time, and I just wanted to ask you if you had anything, last words you'd like to share with everybody listening today.
Well, I think it will still be the same thing. It's really to take care of yourself and to also look out for others. And you need to take care of yourself, and because you need to go the distance. And if you really find that mental well-being, I think mental health challenges shouldn't be something that we should shy away from seeking help from. I mean, if we are ill, right? If we have the flu, we'll see a doctor, right? And I always tell people, say that if you are facing a mental health challenge, it's important that you actually seek help so that you can be back on track, and you could even help other people, right? If I haven't gone through burnout, I've been through depression as well. If I haven't gone through depression and burnout, I wouldn't be on this track of helping people, with what I've learned, with what I've actually gained through those episodes. And yeah, so, take care of yourself, and, and in the midst of that, look out for others as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt that our own trials and tribulations through life bring us to where we are, right? We learn from these difficult moments, and that's what allows us to be the compassionate, caring people that we are in the world and make a difference. So thank you so much for your time today. I know I thoroughly enjoyed this. I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody listening did. We will make sure that we have the links. I trust our staff, so it's probably already there, the links to both the quiz and other helpful resources that you have on your website that I think will be really great for everybody listening when it comes to mental health. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you to all for having me. Yeah.
And what we want to do is we want to invite you to our next episode, which will be Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, North America time again, because we're going to be having our next conversation with Natalie Peckin, who's the CEO of Points of Light. So I look forward to seeing everybody then on Thursday. That won't be me doing the interview. And thank you again, James, for your first of all, for your time, your presence, your hard work for Good Deeds Day, and your contribution to everybody here. And we hope to see everybody again on Thursday. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Stay safe. Stay sane.